Hello, I'm Sarah Woods, Director of the Kentucky Book Festival, a program of Kentucky Humanities. Welcome to the 2020 Kentucky Book Festival online. We're pleased you've taken time to join us for this special festival that brings together authors, readers, and literary enthusiasts from across the country and the Commonwealth, just like we've done for 39 years. All of our Kentucky Book Festival conversations would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. Today, Berea College is bringing you Views of a Place, Writing Kentucky Then and Now. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this discussion with Ashley Blooms, Karen Salyer McElmurray, and Robert Gipe in conversation with Silas House. Silas, take it away.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here with us tonight. I'm glad to be here with my friends, Ashley, Robert, and Karen. I'll tell you just briefly about them. Ashley Blooms is the author of Every Bone of Prayer, which NPR says bears within its pages striking beauty and strangeness in equal measure. Her fiction has appeared in the year's best dark fantasy and horror, fantasy, and science fiction, and Strange Horizons. Her nonfiction has appeared in the Oxford American. She lives in Kentucky with her partner and dog. Of course, she's at work on her second novel. Her debut novel just came out, so we're welcoming her to the fold here tonight. I'm glad to have her. Karen Salyer McElmurray's Surrendered Child, A Birth and Mother's Journey was an AWP award winner. Her novels are The Motel of the Stars, Strange Birds in the Tree of Heaven, and Wanting Radiance. An essay collection, Voice Lessons, will be published by Iris Press in spring of 2021. Robert Gipe lives in Harlan and is the author of two novels, Trampoline and Weed Eater. His third novel, Pop, is scheduled to be published in spring 21. All three novels are from Ohio University Press. Robert is producer of the Higher Ground Community Performance Series, and he grew up in Kingsport, Tennessee. So we are just going to have a laid-back conversation tonight as if we are sitting around on the porch or gathered around the fire, talking to each other about Kentucky and writing, and mostly we'll talk about sense of place. And we'll also just go wherever we end up going and just having a good chat and a good conversation and invite you in. Later on, we'll be taking questions, so we'll look forward to hearing from you all on that. Now, if I can find my notes here. People ask me all the time why the place I'm from is such a deep part of me. And it always surprises me that some people just don't feel the same way about where they're from that we seem to feel about Kentucky and Tennessee and Southwest Virginia. And that there's just some kind of different connection that Appalachian people claim to have, at least. And so I wondered if you would start off, Karen, by talking a little bit about why you think that is, or how Kentucky or Appalachia has shaped you as a person and a writer, and just kick it off for us from there.
Well, I think it would be easy to say it's because that's where my ancestors are from. My parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, but it's a whole lot more than that. I myself have lived away from Kentucky far too long. I've been a traveler and a sort of a roadie in many ways. But the place I come back to, and I don't mean just driving there, I've certainly done enough of that, 9-hour drives, 14-hour drives to get home again. But I come back to it again and again in the deepest way in my psyche. I believe strongly, I guess it's because my grandmother always did, believe in dreams. And what I dream again and again is my grandmother's house in Hager Hill, Kentucky. I dream the land where I used to walk at Bear Mountain. I dream the place. I am the place. And I strongly believe that we all have something called sacred space. I always love the writer of Mircea Eliade. That's a book called The Sacred and the Profane. And he believes that there are sacred spots even on the earth. And for me, the sacred place is Eastern Kentucky. And I always wind my way back there, either driving or riding or in that dream life. I never feel more balanced. I never feel more right than when I'm there in some way. And I feel a deep sense of loss with that having been away and away.
I do too. I live in Lexington now after living 10 years in Berea.
Yeah.
And Berea is only about less than an hour from where I was raised, but I was so home. I've been homesick ever since I left home. And sometimes I think of it as time sick as well, which is a phrase I heard somebody else use. Because I have sort of braided the past and home together in some way. Mm-hmm. And my family that is gone now, you know, and things like that. It's sort of something I can never have again. And so when I go back home to where I was raised, that's the closest I can get to that. So I think that's part of it too. What do y'all think about that? What do you think, Ashley?
I would agree with that. I mean, I think there's definitely like nostalgia in there. There's a displacement from place, from time. That's always present when I think about home. And I think that's part of, you know, it's really complicated my relationship to where I grew up. And I think that's one of the reasons why I set so many books at home and why I return to it, is because that's one of the things I'm drawn to as a writer, is like complicated things, you know, things that are complex, that have a lot of layers to them. And my relationship with my home is one of the most complicated relationships that I've had in my life, you know. And, you know, whenever I moved to Mississippi, I'd lived on the same hill my entire life and moved in 2014 to go to graduate school in Mississippi. And when I went down there, it was one of the things that I noticed was just the connection to place that I felt and the immense homesickness and displacement. And it wasn't something that other people seemed to have as much of a sense of as I did. But I also saw it in my work, and this rootedness and this sureness of where I came from and what my work was about and what I wanted to do with my work. Like, you know, I got there and I knew what I wanted and I knew the direction I wanted to be pointed in. And that was also something that home gave me. So even as complicated it is, you know, it gives and it takes. Yes, I think I keep returning to it for those reasons.
Same for you, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, I've also been pondering since you said it, this idea of time sickness. But I was listening, it was just last week. I guess Ash is one of your teachers, Kiese Lehman, was talking. He just bought back one of his earlier books from his publisher and had re-released it and was doing kind of a tour. And he was doing it with his aunt. Or he did the thing I saw was with his aunt, and she's a preacher, I guess, in Jackson, and they just were talking, and it was amazing. It was just bringing on the people who had brought you to the place that you were as a part of talking about this book, and I mean, you know, and I've been away, and this is as long. I'll tell you another thing that happened. My mother died. Both my parents are gone, so there's not as much. Takes me back to Kingsport as, you know, this is the longest in my life I have gone without being there. But just that kind of, I mean, you know, we all have family that people are of varying support and used to us generally. But that just hearing him honor that person, because places are also people. And I called my cousin. I called a couple cousins and my mom's twin brother, who I hadn't called even though he's been sick. And I think the concept of time sickness will become even more present as this pandemic rolls on, because I think, you know, we talk about it. I mean, we were all fixing to go to the Appalachian Studies Conference right when the state got shut down. And we were just talking about it. It's like we remember things that happened and before that week. And ever since then, it feels like we just have fallen into a wormhole in time or something. It's like being in Ashley's book or something. You know, it's like everything gets wiggy time wise. But yeah, I do think that that the way place lives in dream, Karen was talking about dreams and in memory, is it's interesting to play with that as both the presence and a memory and in something from the, you know, that's not in front of you, how
Right.
place exists without it being where you are.
Absolutely. Well, Ashley, will you read a little bit? We've each selected a really short little section just to share some sense of place from our work. So do you have that ready?
I do. So the part that I chose is one that I haven't gotten to read, even though it's one of my favorite parts in the book. And it's one where I feel like its place is kind of creeps in around the edges, or it's, you know, it's a description where you can kind of see place in the way that it gets reflected in everything. And I think it's also, there's nothing really that says home to me like a woman who's barely holding herself together, driving a car that's barely holding itself together down some winding mountain roads. So that's what's happening here. The main character, Misty, and her mother are headed to a prayer meeting. Misty and her mother were both silent during the rest of the drive down the long, twisting roads. They passed the old gas station with its windows boarded shut, and they passed Elder Mason standing at the mouth of his holler, staring up into the sky. Every day he woke and dressed and walked the 3 miles down to the same spot. He never accepted a ride, even when it was raining or snowing. He waited there until dusk, then turned and walked home again. No one knew exactly what he waited for, but Misty always felt sad when she saw him standing there with his wispy graying hair and thin plaid shirt. She wanted to hand him something warm to drink and stand beside him, so at least he wouldn't have to wait alone for one day. Her mother's car rumbled as they drove, and sometimes the engine went quiet in the steepest curves, and her mother whispered, "Come on, Betty," under her breath as the wheels evened out and they kept chugging along. The car was box-shaped and gray, and both rims were missing from the wheels on the right side. The fabric on the inside of the roof was starting to come loose. It billowed like a circus tent, caught the breeze from the open windows, and ruffled until their mother couldn't stand the sound. She brought thumbtacks from the kitchen and tacked the fabric in place, but the billows didn't go away. They just became smaller, stretching between the tacks. The car had a topography of its own, a special hilly landscape that mirrored the one outside, as though the two had spent so much time together that they were beginning to look alike. The car had belonged to Misty's father once, and it still smelled like coal dust, and there was a bright yellow sticker on the dashboard that read, "Caution, hot work area." The engine had a particular whine to it after it had been driven for a while, a kind of high-pitched grind that was so fine and thin a sound that Misty could barely hear it some days. But she heard it on that drive and was comforted by it until her mother pulled into the church parking lot and shut off the engine.
Thank you. That's a beautiful scene. Now, when you sit down to write a scene like that, for all of us, are you consciously thinking, okay, I'm going to do this to put the reader in this place in the world, to introduce them to this place or show them the place they're familiar with or whatever? Or is it something that just organically happens? It's just part of your writing, period?
I rarely think about it consciously or like set out to write a scene or add something in. It's often just trying to get close to the characters, and in doing that, the place kind of comes up, you know, in them and around them, the way they speak, the way they think, what they do. I mean, occasionally, like in that scene in particular, there's definitely moments where I write very pointedly about things that I love, and I love old cars, and I love crappy cars and the weird sounds that they make. And I love grippos. And so I very purposefully put grippos into the book. And so there are definitely moments where I'm writing, and when I'm writing, I'm like looking directly at Cutchin and directly at Leslie County. And I'm like, I'm putting this here so that when you read it, you know that I'm thinking of you and that this is for you, and trying to hold them and those people, my family, my home, as close to me. And I think those are some of my favorite moments in my writing, is when I get to put in those little things that may completely slip by other readers, but that I hope that, when someone from back home sees it, that they get a little, feeling in their chest that they know that I was thinking of them.
Yes. Yeah. When you go straight to a Southeastern Kentuckian's heart, when you mention Grippos, it's one of the things that we just, it's a cultural thing. Even the people that don't love to eat them still have some kind of connection to them. And I remember when they were you couldn't get them even in Lexington. So I sort of hate that they've gotten more widespread distribution. They don't just belong to us anymore. But what about you, Robert? Do you think, does it just happen? I mean, I guess the subject matter makes it happen sometimes, right? I mean,
I think you're always trying to be specific, and you're always trying to put somebody someplace and capture the essence of it, right? And so, but at the same time, I'm constantly measuring how people are different. I mean, because we're a state line border county. And then, it's like I run through Southwest Virginia to get home to East Tennessee. And I'm constantly thinking about how people are basically the same, that a lot of the ancient roots of people are the same, but they've ended up on this different geography, which has in turn caused a different economic history. I remember when my mom was sick for the last time, and she was in a nursing facility, and one of the people that was taking care of her just reminded me so much of so many of the people I knew in Kentucky, even though there she is, East Tennessean. But, and it was interesting. I found myself just thinking about how, around where I live, the factory jobs are still there. That's a lot of the industrial past that that people remember fondly in Harlan County. That way of making a living where you don't have to have a college education to earn a middle class living are still there, and just how people carry that in their bodies and in their just way they talk and way they treat people is just super fascinating to me. Just what determines us is as much about history and place as it is about DNA, or how that's all mixed up together.
Right.
And so particularly it's interesting, it's like I'd experienced it to a level, but people in Eastern Kentucky sense that there's their county or their creek, and then there's the rest of the world. Those aliens from Leslie County have moved to Harlan County, which there's no wall, but there is kind of actually, I guess, in the but that sense of super specificity, I love really, because I think there must be like a Grippo's belt or Grippo's line. I don't remember, and I don't remember them as much when I lived in Whitesburg in the 90s. I tell you what, I really don't remember from then is Ale-8. When Ale-8 became the national beverage of Kentucky. Not sure.
I didn't grow up on Ale-8. I think it's more of a central Kentucky thing, right?
It was always Mountain Dew in Leslie County. It was more of that than
Mine was knee high.
Orange.
God, I heard a funny one. Somebody in West Virginia tweeted the other day, said Mountain Dew couldn't win an election in West Virginia if it was registered as Democrat.
Well, Karen, when I think about all of your work, but especially Strange Birds and the Tree of Heaven, I go right back to that place. It's so vivid, the sense of place. And so, again, same question for you. Is that something you set out to do, or is it's just there, it just happens?
Well, I mean, part of what I think about in my writing more and more is this sort of strange boundary, permeable boundary between nonfiction writing and fiction writing. A lot of it is me, all these many long drives I've taken to come home to Kentucky, to Eastern Kentucky, particularly visiting my mother as she got more and more sick with Alzheimer's, all these trips home. And in my head are all these snapshots of all those long drives and all the drives at Mining Hollow where my uncle lives outside of Prestonsburg, all the drives on the road to Lancer where my mother's house was, all the drives to Paintsville. I have a million snapshots in my head. And as I write, fiction, as I give experience and bring to life the characters in my fiction, it's like I'm handing them those snapshots and I'm saying, is this where you are? How would it be if you put yourself right there? I worry about that too. Both my parents have passed this year. My aunts have passed away in the past 3 years. All this family passing away. And what's going to happen to those snapshots now? The last time I was home, I went and stood for half an hour at my mother's grave near Prestonsburg. And is that the snapshot I have inside me now? How am I going to translate this new thing, this passing, to fiction? But that's been how it is. It's sort of, I guess, some kind of middle ground between those snapshots of my own true experience and the experience I summon for characters.
That's beautifully articulated. Robert, do you have something ready to read for us?
Sure. This is part of that meditating on the Kentucky and Tennessee thing. This is narrated by a young woman from Kentucky who married a person from Tennessee, a man from Tennessee. And she speaks. Thursday morning, Willett left early to go to Virginia. A short man with a long beard across the way and they're in Tennessee when this happens. A short man with a long beard across the way had a pile of bicycles behind his trailer. A black pickup pulled up full of more bicycles. Longbeard got in the bed of the truck and threw bicycles onto the pile. I was still in my pajamas and walked out and asked Longbeard if he had a bicycle at work. He said he did, and he went to a shed beside the trailer and took out a black and red trick bike. I said, could I borrow it? He said I could, and I rolled up my pajamas so they wouldn't get caught in the chain and pedaled around the trailer park. I got out on the side road and went deeper into the hillside, past small little houses with lots of flowers and cut up tires with their flared out rubber pedals. Going up the holler behind our trailer park, my knees banged against the bicycle handlebars and dogs barked at me. Little black ones, big white ones, long-haired ones, 3 and 4 colors apiece. One little rooster dog ran up and down the cyclone fence marking his yard, barked crazy like he hated me, like I was going to kill his family and burn their house. And that rooster dog made me nervous for what might happen to Mama, because maybe somebody's about to kill her, and maybe I should be barking. Maybe I should be a barking dog running up and down a fence line, making a racket to warn somebody, to show I cared, to show I deserved feeding. With Mama, nobody mentioned calling the law, because she was already a snitch, already working for the law. So they were probably mad at her as anybody else for running off. All her family and friends were either doped up and confused or ignorant and sober and couldn't do anything. So I didn't know who to bark to. On top of the dogs barking, there were bugs buzzing and humming everywhere. By the million, the mist burned off fast and the sun come burning through the gaps in the trees the way it never would in a holler at home. Always some way in Tennessee for the sun to get in, even in the morning. The houses were brick or had nice siding on them. They had flowery bushes and concrete deer and iron porch rails. The trailers had shingle roofs on them and carports built to them, so as not to look like trailers. There was more money here. Even the people who didn't have much had some. How does that happen? On up in the holler, houses got smaller, and the road began to wind up. Houses started having little wood shed buildings and vehicles with shredded blue tarps over them out in their yards. The vehicles were green with mold and orange with rust because the sun stopped getting in that part of the holler. And at the last house I saw before the blacktop give out, before the road turned steep and grown up in weeds and garbage, there was a doghouse with a flat shingled roof, and moss grew at the shingle's edge, and a white dog with a brown spot like a saddle on its back lay on the mossy roof. The dog was chained and watched me, its chin across its folded paws hanging off the front edge of the house. The dog eyed me, but it didn't bark, and skin hung off its eyeballs, showing the white parts of its eyes and its saggy red socket skin. The people's house was dark, the screens in its windows and doors full of holes and peeling. All the vehicles in the yard were being used for storage. The dog rolled over, showed its belly to me. It was a mama dog, but there was no sign of its pups, no sign of the people supposed to be at the house. The dog lay her head back away from me, left her titted up belly facing me, and she sighed, and I wished she could talk.
Love that. One thing I noticed in there I think is such a specific little detail that a lot of people may not even notice is in Appalachia, nicknames are so prevalent, having nicknames, and of course the presence of dogs. But I love it. I think it was Longbeard, right?
Right out the chute, yeah.
Yeah. So they're just, there are just so many, like you said, it's so specific. But to me, it's almost like there's so much rich stuff to share when you're writing about this place, right?
Mm-hmm.
I struggle with writing about some places because I just don't see as much richness to it. I don't mean to say one place is better than the other, but just I guess the things I notice are more numerous at home. We referenced earlier, we alluded to a complicated relationship with the region. Now, I think that makes a better writer. The media that vilifies the place gets a whole lot of attention from us, at least, right? But I think sometimes the media that romanticizes the region gets off the hook pretty easily. And I think that romanticization is just as simplifying and just as dangerous and damaging as the vilification. I think that you are all writers, all of whom I've read, who really strike that balance of just telling the truth, showing the place in a complex way, not vilifying it, and not romanticizing it, not, spoon feeding it in any way. You just present a real place, right, that happens to be Appalachia. Is that something that you have to strive to do to strike that balance, to not, I guess one thing I'm saying is no matter what we do, some people are going to read it as stereotype. And other people are going to read it as we're breaking stereotypes. And we are really just trying to present the place as we know it, as honestly as we can. So what's your reaction to all that? I know it's not very well said, but you got what I mean. Anybody?
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting. None of us are where we grew up, right? I mean, that's a thing. But I think that I think all of us have found community in other people who are thinking about the place from within it, even if their zip code now is somewhere else. And that, that we're blessed. I mean, we're extremely fortunate to have Humming and the Appalachian Writers Week and the extended community of writers who are thinking about the place. And really, I think primarily I write for y'all, for the people in that community, and kind of don't worry too much about, like I got invited to write about Appalachia for the New York Times, and I hated it. I just hated it because I'll never do it again unless I just, it's like I realized how much my orientation was towards just talking to our community, because within it we know that nobody's madder about people in the region than we are, because a lot of times it's our family, but nobody loves it. There's no romanticizer that loves it more than we do. And I don't know, that's that anyway. What do you guys think, Karen?
Well,
Ashley,
the subject of romanticizing is of great concern to me. My farthest back memories are in Eastern Kentucky, but my greatest wish was to leave, and I've left and I've come back, and I've left and I've come back. I came back again, when I was 30 and lived for a while, when I was 18 and lived for a while. But what is it? Am I writing an accurate picture of the place I'm from? I hope so. But how long can I rely upon the memories that I had as a girl? I don't know. Am I romanticizing? Am I portraying the region accurately, socially, politically, environmentally? I hope to God I am. And how do I find out about that? Can I get enough from 4A's home? I don't think so. And I worry about that greatly.
How much? Can I ask Karen something off of that?
Yeah.
How much do you feel like you still are a person of that place now? Do you still feel like you react to things the way you reacted when you were in this place? You know what I mean? Like
what? Give me an example. I know that there's hardly a week that goes by, especially, I teach at Gettysburg College, and there's hardly a week that goes by that somebody doesn't say, "You're not from around here, are you?" Or people will say that. I had somebody say that to me in Whole Foods like last week. "You're not from around here, are you?" And so, but that's not what you mean, is it?
Well, kind of. I'm just wondering, do you stop experiencing things as an Eastern Kentuckian at some point after so many decades away?
I worry that I do. That's not much of an answer, but I worry that I do. I think that it surprises me in ways that I don't. I think some of the deepest cellular level of me, that's who I am. But does it go away, that connection? I don't know.
People talk to me all the time about my accent. And I always say, out in the world, the larger world, my accent automatically identifies me as being from a particular place. But when I go back home and I'm with my cousins that I grew up with,
yes,
it doesn't matter that my accent has been retained. What matters is that what I talk about is different. It's not the way I say it, it's what I'm talking about. And that is that's formed a canyon between us and what we talk about,
Boy, howdy. I feel that so much. When I'm here, they say, "You're not from around here, are you?" And then I go home and I see cousins or my uncle, and the general idea is that I've got above my raising and that I'm too good for them. And I hope to God I don't seem like that, but it's the canyon. I feel that canyon. Yeah. I do. And
I think the very act of knowing that you're conscious of it means that you're not doing it, Karen, that you are not. So before we run out of time and get to the questions, I wanted Karen, do you have something ready to read?
Yes, thank you. Just a little piece. This is from Wanton Radiance, and it's a chapter called My Own Sweet Girl. And it's in the point of view of Miracell Loving, my narrator, who is probably me in some way. In this brief scene, she is driving and driving. Thinking earlier of my talking about being a roadie. She's driving and driving, looking for a town called Radiance. The time is 1993. I took my time, stopped at historic markers, sipped coffee at diners in little towns with names like Awe or Pelfrey. I made up a little song for myself as I drove. I'm leaving now, goodbye. I rolled the window down and surfed the passing air. I tilted my head out like a little dog looking for the way home. My only direction was the sound my tires made on asphalt. I was heading toward a town called Radiance. I liked how some little place would appear out of nowhere, a sign for a truck stop, some place with a jukebox is at every table, one with low-down redneck songs, maybe even that song my mother used to play, Hold Me in the Morning, Hold Me at Night. I wanted someone to hold me more than ever now, someone to hold me, dive into me, make me hurt, but not love, not yet. Cody Black was right. Here I was all over again, driving towards something I didn't know. I rode past smaller and smaller towns until signs for gas and lodging gave out and a marker promised historic route, mountains. That road was lined by stone fences, then by mountains that grew steeper. The road gave out before the atlas promised. There were still signs, but none pointing to directions. Fresh eggs, Jesus, one way or no way. I'd seen all kinds of mountains, green ones near cliffs and the ocean up in Maine, ones with flat roads in between with buggies and the Amish. But these roads tugged me along, pulled me deep into them until the gravel road got eaten up by dirt. That dirt road led into a spread of evergreens until it narrowed to a wooden bridge. I inched my car over. More signs, sweet sorghum for sale. My tires skimmed dust, and I thought of Cody, his hands loose on the steering wheel, the way his mouth and his throat and his chest took in the world. He'd have loved this world. My car, the only one for miles, until I met a long blue Camaro and another woman driving, two kids in the back seat, their faces pressed against the window. It was late afternoon by then, and the mountains were soaking up daylight. I'd have an hour or two at most before dusk, and I still had no idea where I was. So I was glad for the country store where I pulled over at last. Some big-handed man was running the register, and a trucker just finished unloading crates of soft drinks. They were both leaning against the counter, listening to a wiry woman in work boots talk, and they made room for me as I spread my maps, looking for the turns I'd missed, the way toward where I was headed.
Thank you. So much love about that. The line, I may not be getting exactly right, but the mountains were soaking up daylight.
Oh,
I know exactly what you
That's
mean.
the one I was going to say. She ain't been gone too long.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting. I'm going to read just a real short little section from Clay's quilt. I want to read from it because it turns 20 in March, and I was planning on having a big celebration for that, and now I can't. Not in person, at least. But I think it's interesting those passages where somebody's going down the road, and that may be because we're so often doing that in that part of the world. Free Creek was a narrow holler, really nothing more than an etched, packed dirt road with a shallow whitewater creek on one side and a row of houses on the other. On each side rose a great mountain, so steep that when someone stood in the middle of the holler, they couldn't see to the top of the other one. There were only about 15 houses, and everybody knew everybody else. When Clay was little, newscasters boasted that the war on poverty was being waged in these very mountains. But if the government had fought any battles close to Free Creek, no one here had heard the guns. Clay drove slowly down the holler, silent in summer heat, and looked on Free Creek like it was a picture. When he thought about home, he always thought of long, cool evenings when you could hear the silver sound of men playing horseshoes, the redundant bounce of the boys playing basketball down on the road. The women hung out clothes, swatted children on the rump, canned kraut. People worked in their gardens until dusk, played rummy on the porch, shouted out that supper was ready. The men worked all day, and sometimes they came home drunk. The women often threw their drunk husbands' clothes into the yard. There might be a fist fight or the firing of a pistol into the mountain. Nobody was out this evening, though. Clay cruised by the houses sitting close to the road, sealed up tight against the summer. It was supper time, so nobody was outside. Far up on the mountain, two trailers sat side by side with all the windows open and box fans in their open doorways. That was how every house had survived when Clay was little, but now almost everybody had air conditioners. So just a real physical the sort of sense of place there. And when I was writing that, I was literally driving up that holler where my family was from and recording all of that, and just writing it all down, taking note of it. And so that was actually that holler in 1998 or whatever when I was writing, and it's changed a lot since then, even though they say we never change here and we're 25 years behind everything and all that. It's just not true. Well, before we turn it over to Sara to give us some questions, I wondered if each of you could tell me your favorite place in Appalachia, since we're all Appalachian writers here. If you have a favorite place that comes to mind for you, no matter where it might be.
A place that is now?
Whatever. I'll tell you mine. Mine is a riverbank down in southern Kentucky on the Tennessee border, where the Obie River and the Wolf River in Kentucky, near where they come together. And it's just a place that my family, growing up, it was where we were always happiest, when we would go to that river bank, which became a lake bank later. And so when I go there, again, it goes back to that time sickness.
Yeah.
It's the place contains that perfect moment in time for me. And such a nostalgia is maybe not the right word, because nostalgia to me is too precious, because I'm not just thinking about all the good. I'm also thinking about, the times of argument and the times of explosive conversation and all those things. I mean, one of the things I love about my family so much is how passionate they were about whatever it was. They loved in a big way and they fought in a big way, and so that place encompasses all that for me. Anybody else? I know I'm throwing one at you out of nowhere.
I guess mine would be, what I want it to be is Bear Holler, where my great-grandfather's place was, but that's a whole other story. The last time I went there, some guy came out of the house and picked up a rock and chased us off. He couldn't go up there anymore. It was that's a whole story. But I guess it'd be Jenny Wiley State Park. I love going there, and I love this one particular hike I can go on, and I can't tell you who the grave is, but this hike that comes out on this like a little cliff there, and there's a grave, and I'd like to go up to that point and just sit there and look out over, and that park and that lake are amazing to me. My father's ashes were scattered there back in February, so it's even more dear to me.
Robert?
Carriage Day was a fun feller. I remember him fondly from when he'd come following after you to Hyman in the summertime. A bunch. I think the first place that, came to mind was one of the fellowship halls, one of the churches that would let us have higher ground, our community cast meetings, and only a couple of us. A couple of the cast members went to church there, Mount Olive. But also the other place that just jumped in my head was there was a bar in Mingo County called the Red Robin Inn that got taken with the road that I loved so much. Did you go there, Karen?
I know of it. Yes, I do.
The Jim Webb used to take his Appalachian Study students, and they'd have to give a 5-minute talk on one of the items of memorabilia behind the bar for their Appalachian Studies final. But there's of course a zillion others. Ashley, what do you got?
I don't know that it has a name, but it's in the hollow where I grew up. There's a place where if you go up far enough, sort of up, that there's some horses and cows that are up there. And I'm still not entirely sure who owns them or who owns the land, but it's a very popular spot to go. And when you go up there, it's about as close as I've come to being above the mountains. You're still not. You're mostly just even with the tops of them. And you can kind of look down. And even the way to get there, we always use 4-wheelers to get there. And there was just such a feeling of kind of being in something's belly, like in the belly of the mountains, because everything was so close and so green and so near, that it had this very magical, far away feeling. And then when you got there, it was this the closest to the sky as I'd ever been at home. You're usually kind of boxed out by the mountains. There's sort of this intermediary between you and the rest of the world, and that was as close as I'd ever gotten to actually being near the clouds.
Great. Well, thank y'all. It's been a pleasure being with you. I just wish we were together in person.
Me too.
And that we will be again soon, surely.
Maybe we can have a party when your book turns 21. That'd be great.
Maybe as we wait for Sara to come on, I'll just say that all of us have been to the Appalachian Writers Workshop at Hyman Settlement School. And that's a really powerful, special place for me. I know it is for y'all too.
How much?
And one night we were all sitting around together talking about why it was such a powerful, special place. And somebody said it's because it was at a confluence, and confluences have power, and somebody said it's because of the feng shui of the way the settlement school sat or something. I don't know what the right term is. And then Betty Smith, the folk singer who used to come every year, she said, it's the people. That's all she said. It's the way that we are when we're together here is what makes it such a powerful, special place. And Robert said that right at the top of the show. I think it was Robert that said it's about the people, the people are the place. So yeah, I think of that landscape when I think of home, but I'm mostly thinking about the way people sound, the way people interact with each other, the way they touch each other and talk to each other. It does go beyond the land, even though the land informs that too. It's all tangled up together. And I think that's what my deepest emotion about it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's killing people not to hug.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, so much so.
Hi, guys. Yes, I hope we're back together in 2021 too, maybe sooner than that for the book festival next year. But I'm so glad you're here with us tonight. We have some questions, as I mentioned earlier, and I think this is a good one to start with. Who are some of the most important writers that have served as inspiration or even modeled the kind of writing you strive for? Silas, can we start with you?
Well, that's always a hard question because it's always changing, but my top ones are always Willa Cather, Thomas Hardy, Lee Smith. I don't know that I would have been a writer without Lee Smith's work. She gave me permission to write just by writing. I first found Black Mountain Breakdown in 9th grade, and it just blew my mind that I could write about my own people. Similarly, Dorothy Allison, too, because she was writing about rough people, and I'm from rough people, and so to see them being given a voice, and they're so often ignored and not given a voice, was huge for me. So those are the main ones that come to mind. I'll pass it off to Ashley.
Well, I definitely second Dorothy Allison for similar reasons for giving permission. Louise Erdrich is a really big influence on my work, and I think she's one of those writers that, you know, if I could do any bit of what she's able to do, especially with time and the way that she will bend it back on itself, and that feels about truer than anything else I've ever read. She's definitely a writer that I set my compass by.
Robert?
I'd lift up Gurney. Of course, we all have so many that it's so dangerous to name anybody, but I'd lift up Gurney in part because not just did I, love what he wrote, but I knew him when I worked at Apple Shop in the 90s. He taught me so much about just how to be a person in the community and how to represent yourself as a writer and just how to be in the world as a writer. And just generosity, that I think he's very symbolic of the generosity within our community for helping other people and caring about other people. And plus, but also just his both complete groundedness in the place and also his kind of psychedelic ability to kind of invent things that don't exist but still feel grounded, that I really enjoyed trying to be a part of.
Karen?
Well, I'd have to say, I'll third Dorothy Allison, her courage. She always says something like, until you're willing to go to the hardest place in your writing, even the darkest place, your writing won't be worth a damn. And I sure believe that. I'd also say James Agee. I would say Thomas Wolfe. I love Look Homeward Angel. I mean, every day you ask me this question, it'd be different. Marilyn Robinson, Leslie Marmon Silko. Those are probably my top favorite writers.
And I love Dorothy Allison. The scariest I ever was reading in front of Dorothy Allison.
Oh,
when she was at home that night. That's a level. I rewrote everything I wrote that morning just because I was scared to death to read in front of her. She's so respectable. And
wasn't that talk just amazing?
One of the all-time best
Totally.
moments ever at the Hyman Summit School. Okay, Sarah, what else you got?
All right. One of our listeners would love to hear you all speak about the idea of setting as a character. I don't know who wants to start.
Well, I'll just say real quick that I think of it that way. I think of it that way, and that I'm spending as well. Actually, that's not true, because it is more organic to me than creating the character is. I have to real consciously create the character and do a lot of research. And usually on Sense of Place, when I'm writing about where I'm from, that's just all comes real natural. And we're talking about getting too far away from it. I have now lived away from home 11 years, but when I'm writing, I always go straight back there. And Willa Cather said that you learn everything that you need to know as a writer before you're 10 years old. And so, of course, most of us are spending that first 10 years in the place we would call back home or hometown.
Well, I talked to my students. I was even talking to them this last week about places as characters, and I was giving them some examples like Dune, and there's a planet and it's a character, and it's like the main point of conflict, the ownership of water. But I don't really do that in my writing. It's not like Dune. It's more like, I don't know, people have before said my writing is very atmospheric, and I think that I gathered that wasn't necessarily a good thing that might have been referred to, but I think of atmospheric I don't know, in a way I'm writing ghosts. I'm summoning ghosts of my ancestors and my ghosts of textures and scents and tastes, and I'm summoning ghosts and bringing them to life. And so for sure place is a character in that way.
I'll cede my time to Ashley on this one, because she's got the elements of setting actually talking in her book.
How cool.
Yeah, I definitely like to manifest as many things as I can. That's, one of the benefits of using genre fantastical elements in your work, is that you can have the place talk back to you. And that, place and the animals and the land definitely has a voice in every bone of prayer. And it feels like it has a voice, I think, back home and growing up, and I think as a character, like as a force in the story, place definitely exerts force in everything that I write. It has a kind of gravity so that everything kind of warps around it. And I think that makes it feel very present and alive on the page, is that, being there with the characters, it changes all of their choices. It gives them the choices that they have or takes them away. And I think that, yeah, that's a big part of how I write.
That reminds me of in the Breyer sermon, Jim Wayne Miller talks about their places in these mountains, wild places. And I can't say verbatim the way he says it, but basically he's saying that there are places in this region, in this place, that are holy places or sacred places or places where the veil is thin. And I've really felt that many times before. I hope everybody will read the Breyer Sermon by Jim Wayne Miller. I think it's one of the great masterpieces of Appalachian literature, for sure, that everyone should read.
And that is an amazing moment at Hyman.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All for those answers. I'll do one more quick one. And you don't have to answer if you don't want, because I know some people don't want to spoil their upcoming projects, but if you could share a bit about what you're writing next, when we can expect it maybe, or anything you want to share about future projects.
My new book comes out in spring of 22. Right now it's called Lark Ascending. That may change, who knows. And it's a very different novel for me. It's a speculative novel. And it's about a young man and his family who are refugees. They're American refugees trying to get into Ireland, which is the last country taking Americans in a sort of a few years in the future. So, but even though it's very different for me, it's still about family and created family and the environment, which are things that always show up in my work. So yeah, that'll be out before I know it.
Well, I've been writing a variety of essays, have a big pile of those. But in terms of a longer work, I think I'm going to enter again into the world of memoir and try to do a long work. I haven't ventured there in quite some time, and it's going to be, the main thing I can say is about faith, lost faith, rediscovered faith, wishing for faith, finding it in the oddest ways and manifestations.
I'm working on my second book on deadline right now. I've got till the end of the month to so be thinking of me. But it's set in southeastern Kentucky too, and every bone of prayer sort of dealt with names as kind of a source of magic, and this one is really looking at the sort of my take on portal fantasies or doorways into other worlds, which is really about escapism. It deals a lot with addiction and with grief, and a lot with autonomy, which is something that's kind of emerged as I've been writing, and what happens when you feel like you can't change your own future, and the loss of autonomy and what that does and how that leads to some issues.
Oh, I can't wait.
The third book in the Kennard County trilogy is coming out in spring. And this one, Dawn, who's narrated the first two's daughter is 15, which is how old she was in the first book. And she's navigating a different Appalachia. She's fallen in with the Appalachian foodies and comes up with her own mountain herb derived soda pop. They're also making movies, and we had several movies shot here in Harlan. So I do a little, that's my experience now. But basically they're trying to adapt to the new economy, but the old economy and their old adventures. Well, one of them gets killed, and they have to hide the body in the middle of the movie shoot, and and so it's kind of about how it's hard to turn the page when the old ways persist. That anyway, it's a bunch of, it's probably too much stuff, but y'all don't need to read it. Don't.
I just want to listen to you read like all day long.
Well, before we go, I want to make an appeal to everybody to buy books from Joseph Beth Booksellers. I don't know if there's a link to that on the Kentucky Humanities. There it is. And they will get them right to you. So it's so important to support our local independent bookstores. And Joseph Beth is the bookseller for the Kentucky Book Festival. So I'm really thankful. We're all really, I know I can speak for you all on this and say how thankful we are for Joseph Beth. And we're thankful for the book festival and for Sara, who I'm sure is so exhausted by now. It has been many, many days of the festival now. So thank you, Sara, for all of your work.
Well, thank you all for being here. I can't wait to read your new books. And Ashley, it sounds like you and Alex Harrow may have been hanging out. The 10,000 Doors of January sounds right up your alley. So thank you all so much for being here and for your insights and your discussion. And thank you to our sponsor, Berea College, as well. We also want to thank the audience for tuning in tonight and for joining us for this 2020 Kentucky Book Festival online event. As Silas mentioned, if you're interested in purchasing one of the books discussed today, please visit our independent bookstore partner, Joseph Beth Booksellers, at josephbeth.com. They also have a display up in their store in Lexington with a bunch of book festival books, and it's really easy to find it right when you walk in, so we hope you'll visit. For a complete schedule of the book festival conversations, visit kyhumanities.org and follow us on social media at kyhumanities. For Kentucky Humanities, I'm Sarah Woods.